The reason I almost didn't buy this shirt is because I don't want to have to kneel and scrape over the fact that my views are very different. It's an experiment in civility. I think it looks good and that he's an interesting person. He deserves a chance and give him the benefit of the doubt. But he isn't old enough to understand or appreciate what happened with me. I grew up in the city during the 60s. If you look at Woodstock, you see there's a lot of indoctrination about libertinage, abandonment for love, making the group bond through freedoms of uh, that glorified sexual intercourse and played down the idea that it was um, satanic. They saw it as liberating. And we now know it was part of a plot by the CIA and the Beatles to set people like me up, and I was earmarked for it. But they put me in the Falk Medical Library in 1984, so I saw the first information about the AIDS attack before the public saw what was going on, before there was any medicine or treatment. So it's ridiculous to say that I wouldn't be aware of how serious and dangerous the situation was for people like me. And I was trying to get help and information, prepare for the age of the internet, to get internet medical information out to Africa, and playing up the public relations and the news between the opportunity and the paranoia that attended the situation. And I believed, as I still believe, that the mandate was to put aside so-called compromise or gross innuendo. I didn't think the best idea was to sneer at the victims or the at risk. And what happened was that I thought detective work was called for. What happened was that it was organized and key players were bartering. Jeffrey Corporation was bartering the release of Nelson Mandela in return for cooperation from the elders. And the Obama presidency, Bush was pushing behind the scenes for. So, token progress in international race affairs. Traore seems like the new movie star in progressive Africa. It's not that it's a bad thing, but with Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF, Save the Children, the Hunger Project around, I thought the people should put their minds not on the idea of unnecessary genocide, but of substantive encouragement of understanding and alleviating poverty, because that's how birth rates go down, because birth rates are high because women have insecurity for support. They need children. The infant mortality is high, so they need to have a lot of children. Well, nobody listened to this. What they did was they set up, and ghoulishly they made it look like a black eye for an eye situation. It was completely ghoulish guerrilla theater. It was run by these suit and tie, really spiffy white Catholic strategists, not the people who you would normally see as interrogating the civil rights movement. But the Black Panthers threw in with them. They said, this is about the white, his sheltered belief in sexual pleasure. This is the exact thing that laid the groundwork for the war game. And they were in on the war game. Trump worked with the Green Party through the whole thing. You could see that by the girl they chose to mislead me through the office of Peter Gabriel is to somehow be in love with me. She becomes engaged to be married to me so they can wreck my, humiliate me and terrorize me and justify terrorizing me. And they had this landmine about John Lennon. It was really very creepy Hollywood espionage situation that went way, way back. One of Netanyahu's favorites, Gail Burston, wrote the script and sent it to me in 1974. And it was way over my head. You're supposed to trust these people. She was introduced to me by the daughter of a magistrate in Allegheny County. And Allegheny County refused to review it. These were people who were involved in murder of important black people. And I went downtown and protested. These people were involved in murder of important black people. You need to get them off the bench. And the Black Panthers and NAACP said, no, yo, no, yo, these are distinguished people, and refused to look at the evidence. I don't care about the evidence, they said. And John Schulman, I was chased out of Pittsburgh for reporting him. One of the things I did so-called wrong was report him to the post office for suspected mail fraud. They chased me out of Pittsburgh. Don't talk about distinguished people that way. He was arrested on $8 million museum heist. The mayor had the courtesy to apologize to me about that, what he called the absolutely horrible things that have been done to me in Pittsburgh. But Seattle has never apologized to me for supporting him. To this day, they are obsessed with my grandmother's wedding band. That's a symbol of, consciousness in the Green Party. That's a symbol of their black marketing through Hollywood and Yoko Ono, of this tragic, weird story that comes from Nosferatu. I mean, why would you use the image of an eye for an eye with the black Palestinian demanding artificial intelligence tweet affirming him from UW Dialectical? UW Dialectical are the people who did this. Why would you use that image? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you use that image? I certainly have never meant any harm to black people, ever, never. You can rake the coals and get scripts of BS. I was indoctrinated with the free speech movement and onto something that needed to be found out. And people are cutting and pasting quotes out of context and magnifying them for their significance. Never did I ever do anything to harm a black person or mean any harm to a black person. It was my revulsion at white racism, which is obviously extremely sinister and manipulative, that pushed me into politics to begin with. I very cautiously detailed the case for divestment from South Africa, which was clear. And they were saying, oh, you're giving rock and roll a bad name. He's writing to Peter Gabriel. He's trying to pull something. He thinks he's Biko. Those kinds of theme park absurdities and slanders come out with recent days with the Freedom Flotilla. The Freedom Flotilla is a photo yacht, selfie yacht, they say. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. And they gratify themselves by the fact that Greta is too young to understand the issues too. She looks at me and says, that's a seedy old man who had too much, who was too happy in his youth. He got to see too much action and he was put in his place, because that's the way they sell it. And you get the people responsible saying, we're the Freedom Flotilla. We're the humanitarian, well, the people who Seattle supported through this whole thing are shooting unarmed Palestinians who come for bread when they're starving. This is the Star Sandwich food fight that they're glorifying. And now Nosferatu, who's going to start a war in the Middle East, and, Yemen bombed him, so he's going to bomb Iran, and it's all going to go up in smoke. What does it take to make you see that a deaf person has very limited ability to decide for themselves the difference between following what people prescribe and making a reasonable dissenting opinion? They said, oh, your dissenting opinions are meaningless because of your personal behavior. I said that's exactly the sort of thing that's going to reveal the entrapment operation of the police state in this attack. And I was just ignored. How can you ignore the evidence for something like that? It doesn't make any sense unless you approve. I mean, that makes sense. Oh, these people are sexually reckless. If the Catholic community of Pittsburgh had done something other than traffic me as a child and write a script leering about me, the Bethonians objected to the theft and degradations of the ex motive. It's what they wrote. They instead had said, Jimmy, sit down. You're too young to understand this. The environment is being set up by the CIA to push you into self destruction, that sex is a force of creation. I would have listened because I listened to what people told me. I was an curious child with no real, I was just deaf and following what people told me. The people were saying, "Oh, you should get the pussy," That's what they were saying. Come around with big, deep pink pants and stolen cars and hitting me in the head and saying, "You're not going to school." Taking me to strange women's houses when I was shattered with trauma and they were using me. Strange women. We were adult, fully grown adult, and I was a child. Pittsburgh calls it a provincial norm. It says I'm interfering with their ideas about Africa.